Hello, this is Darren Pulsipher, Chief Solution Architect of Public Sector at Intel, and welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. On today's episode, we're going to talk about data privacy with special guest, Assistant General Counsel of Data Privacy at Sutter Health. Jeremy, welcome to the show today. As I announced, you are the Assistant General Counsel of Data Privacy at Sutter Health, which is in Northern California. And my neighbor, it's wonderful to have someone actually on the podcast in person today. It's awesome to have you. Thanks for coming, Jeremy.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Jeremy, give me a little bit about your background, because you have a unique background, especially for all of our government listeners, because you were in the military for several years.
Yeah, I graduated from law school and then went right into the JAG Corps. So I was in the U.S. Air Force. I was a JAG officer for about 9 years, active duty. And during that time, I did a lot of different things. But one of the jobs I did was the custodian of records, or the records manager. I ran a couple of shops, so I had 2 different offices that I ran that I was the records custodian for. After I switched into healthcare, my last assignment in the military was actually as counsel for a hospital, actually the East Coast, for the hospitals along the Northeast. And I got out of the Air Force active duty side, and I'm still a reservist working at the hospital. But now I work for Sutter Health as one of their counsel.
So would you say a lot of the things that you learned in the Air Force helped you with the data privacy work that you're doing now in Sutter Health? Or is it completely different?
It's all the same legal framework at some level. So I think it is helpful, but they're a lot different in terms of the approach and how the regulations actually apply, whether it's government or private sector. So there are some differences there. And sometimes it's just the design of the entity. So a private sector company has a different goal sometimes than the Air Force does, or the military in general.
Now, when you and I were talking at a barbecue the other night, and you were talking about data privacy, which is a big deal. We hear about data privacy all the time. Yeah. And you blew my mind with some new terms that you guys are using in the healthcare industry, what data privacy really means. Because when I think of data privacy, I'm thinking no one can see the data. It's private.
Yeah, I think we had this conversation. I think that might have been the problem that got me onto your podcast. So
it is.
I shouldn't have talked about that. But yeah, it's an interesting conflict, right? You hear data privacy, and as my government hat, it was totally, hey, let's keep that data in the government, right? It was keep it protected, keep the secret stuff secret. Even though we have the Privacy Act, you have a lot of exceptions to that, and the FOIA, right? You have the Freedom of Information Act. You have things designed by default to kind of be designed really to protect that information, not release it. In healthcare, the push over the last, 20 years, but really, since HIPAA was passed in 96, and then high tech a few years later, and now with the Office of National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, or ONC, they're doing even more to push that data into the homes, into the devices of patients. So it's definitely, when I hear data privacy, I hear appropriate access is the way I would phrase that.
So that's totally opposite of what I think as a technologist. When you say data privacy, it means I'm locking that data down to only specific people.
Right. That would be data security in my world. If I hear security, okay. Right. So I hear data security and data privacy, and sometimes they're a conflict like that. But that's what it would mean in my world.
Yeah, you were explaining, because of some of the regulations around HIPAA and things like that, you're having the access to your data and allowing other people to access that data is a right that you have.
Yep. Yeah, it has been since, like I said, since 96. And when high tech came out in about it went into effect about 2013, 2014, in that time frame, what that did was actually say, not only do you as a patient have a right to it, you can direct your healthcare provider to give it to a third party. So I could give it to my attorney or to my friend, my neighbor. It didn't matter. I have the right. And I could also ask what type of the medium I want it released in, whether it's electronic or paper. So there's been some rights given to patients, and it's not just healthcare data either. I mean, we've seen this movement with GDPR. There's laws now in Brazil, Canada, China, India, California, Virginia, Washington State. We have this privacy law and this movement to controlling your data, your personal information. And there are probably about as many laws as there are that many definitions of what personal information is. So sometimes it creates quite a conflict. If I have a patient or someone in Virginia, but California law is ruling, the ruling law, sometimes there's a conflict there, and I have to figure that out. So yeah, the movement to privacy right now is really kind of more access, right? And control from the individual.
So that's really interesting, because a lot of times when I think back to data privacy or data security, I'm always thinking about the security side of things, being an IT professional, meaning I can limit who has access to things. With data privacy, it's more than just limiting. It is making sure you can have access.
Right.
So it's opening up the doors.
Right. Yeah, there's an authentication or a verification of who has that access right. So you actually have to go through the process. If anyone can request it, and there's a list of people who can access it. So yeah, it's more of a validation, right? And who has authorized use and access. So even the company itself, right? So even internal use sometimes is implicated in that. And one branch of the company might not be able to access what the other branch of the company has. So it can be very awkward with data privacy and data security. Data security would be, hey, let's protect it from those bad actors. And that's kind of where we have that level. So everyone's a victim, right? Everyone can be attacked. Everyone has this idea that a foreign actor, and by foreign I mean not your company,
right,
can come in and get your data. But so we're now balancing both that cybersecurity and this privacy right, which can create a lot of work for not just for the legal side, but for the operation side, for the technical folks.
All right, so let's talk about the technical. You actually work with your technical teams pretty closely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like on a daily type basis.
Yeah, had 2 phone calls a day with them. Sure.
So, and how is that? Are you engaged at the design phase, or are you after the fact? Tell me how you're working with your IT professionals.
I would like to be at the design phase more, to be honest with you, because I think that privacy by design concept really comes into play. And we do have, it's not just me. Let's be real. There's a whole team of folks who do this on the privacy side and our information security side. And I work with them. So I'm not involved in every project, but I certainly am involved. And all those privacy officers, all the information security officers, we have a regular cadence of meetings every week. We'll talk about different projects. But no, I'm involved in a lot of different aspects of the pre-planning. So I'll come in and I ask them to loop me in very, very early on their planning, because it makes a difference on how they built something. If the goal is to lock it down because it's not going to be health information, that's a totally different approach to how we do our medical record, for example, and how we access the patient portal. So I talk to the patient portal folks quite often about things they want to do, and whether that meets the regulations or not. And so there's a lot of discussions that go on. And some of the technical aspects will be beyond my ability to understand everything, I'll be honest. But over the last 5 years, when I jumped strictly into this privacy role, it's required me to kind of change my whole viewpoint. It's not just the legal regulatory matters. It's now I really have to know kind of the technical side. So I had to go get the CISP, that accreditation and kind of, that, and just work with those teams to kind of get me up to speed so I could be helpful to them.
Well, yeah, you probably have just enough technical knowledge to be really dangerous, would be my guess.
That's probably true. Yeah. You never want to leave me the technical advisor on that. That's true. Yeah.
Well, just like, maybe I should go take a couple law classes, then I can handle law things by myself.
Yeah,
right?
You can handle lots of stuff.
I've already tried that. It didn't work very well.
It's that way. Yeah, and I'm an advisor, right? My role as a legal advisor is exactly that. I advise. So we'll have a lot of questions come up about how to do things, what database, what type of database, right? Is it just a SQL database? Is that going to meet our needs? Or is there a cloud provider that can provide something? And so we'll have a lot of various discussions about how to set this up in a compliant way.
So that's really important. It sounds to me that you have your legal teams, when you're going through this, engaged early on, understand the technology. They can't just, well, the law says this. You've got to understand the technology too, it sounds like.
Yeah. Some of us understand it better than others, is the reality. And I'm one of the ones who have chosen, I guess, to try to get, put my geek hat on and try to get in there and understand it. But yeah, there are some contract attorneys who, by virtue of negotiating that contract, you kind of have to know what the product is. And so they'll understand some of it too. But the ins and outs and working with all of the technology side of it is usually on my end.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So what would you say are the challenges, or what do you think the future is with data privacy, not just in healthcare, but do you see it moving beyond there? Because you are in these conferences about data privacy and so where do you see things moving?
Well, really, it's more about individual access. That's where I see the regulations. I see the push going. I see politicians and think tanks pushing to individual right to access. Right now, all of the big companies, Googles and Facebooks and whoever, they have options where you can go and clear out your data, or you can prevent them from selling your data in various ways. I think what I see the privacy aspect of it is really going to change a little bit of how we track things. So cookies might not be as big of a thing, right? Those tracking devices, we might not have the traditional cookies that we've had or seen before. We'll have to have something else that helps those targeted advertisers or those behavioral advertisers to look into. But employment data, all sorts of other data, they're already regulated. And really what it means is there's a lot more room for individual engagement. For individuals to try to control their data. Now, it's not an absolute right in most cases. The company needs data to function, so they're going to be able to keep some data. But I think it's more and more going to be regulated. And in the United States, I think we're going to have more complexity and more problems before we have a standardization.
Is that because we've got 50 states that all have their own regulations?
Yeah, we have 3, I think, right now. I think Virginia's, Washington, Colorado passed theirs too. So we have at least 4. It's just going to be a hodgepodge of those.
That just must keep you up at night. Trying to just keep track of all these regulations and then hurting your IT app developers saying, guys, you can't do that because in Colorado...
Yeah, there's
this in California this.
And there's a couple of functions. The benefit of being a healthcare company, we have 24 or 26 hospitals, depending on how you count a couple of the rural hospitals. But we have several hospitals. They're all in Northern California. We do have some clinics I guess there's one hospital in Hawaii too. But we have some clinics in Oregon. We do some practice in Utah as well. But those are the only states that I really have to worry about until I have a potential breach. And then you're right.
Oh.
If that data gets released or breached, then it really would matter where these individuals reside. Because sometimes that's how the law is written. It's not the business reside, it's where the data was going to go. And so we do have, there's...
So for example, let's say I live in Utah, but I'm in Northern California skiing. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I would ever do that. If I live in Utah, I would stay there. Yeah, that's backwards. Yeah. All right. But I'm in Utah. I'm visiting the beach in Northern California, and I hurt myself. I go to your hospital. Do the data privacy laws of Utah apply to you guys here in Northern California?
Maybe. And
so, it's very complex then.
Right. Traditionally, what would happen is the data laws that would prevail would be California's until such time there's a breach. And if we had some sort of breach, we released something or ransomware or something happened where we had to report it. We had the duty to report under the law. Sometimes that law is actually written that we actually have to follow the location of the residence of the patient. So that's really the complex. Utah's law wouldn't govern how we actually do our practice, and how we provide care and how we do that, preserve the data. But it would maybe apply on a breach scenario, which again, you'd have to do that evaluation, which we've done. without going into a lot of detail, we did
you
have
can,
a couple of incidents where we had to analyze a 50-state breach. And we had patients from all over that we had to analyze, okay, who do we need to notify and who don't we need to notify? So yeah, it's pretty complicated in some cases, and sometimes we send that out. I'll be honest, sometimes it's just, we're going to pay for that service and get them to evaluate that.
So that's a good point too. Sometimes if you don't have the knowledge inside, both IT and legal, use somebody that does understand that.
Yeah, and there's a whole industry popping up around there. You see law firms who now are engaging lawyers, kind of doing my type of work, where we have shifted our focus into the privacy and information security side. So instead of this traditional law firm that used to handle employment law only, well, they have a whole section now of 5 or 6 attorneys who handle information type of cases too. So yeah, I think there's some good ones and there's some not so good ones too. I mean, so you just have to be aware, but there's a whole market out there for that. Yeah. And it's great help. I mean, if you need the help, I would recommend go get that help.
Go get that help.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like if I am developing any kind of applications that deal with people's data, which I think that would be almost every application.
A lot of applications.
Right?
Yeah.
Then it is important to understand that there are data privacy laws that are different in each state, different in each country.
Yep.
So you do have to understand the ramifications of using that data, storing the data.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And you being on the App Store, any App Store, if it's a phone app especially, like Apple's tracking that now, right? Apple has come out and said, hey, we want to be very conscientious and give that consumer the ability to check or uncheck, right? And they're supposed to be respected. So yeah, you have to develop your app with the capability of, hey, I'm going to be scraping or collecting all this data because this is going to be a revenue stream. Well, it may not turn into that revenue stream that you originally planned. But yeah, it's all up in the air. I think it's going to get more complicated before it gets solved and more easy or easier.
So, all right, great. Jeremy, thank you for coming on the show today. I think you've enlightened a lot of us on just the concepts of data privacy. It's not what I thought that was data security. So I learned something new all the time.
Yeah. No problem. Thanks for having me, Darren. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you liked our episode, go ahead and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast or video streaming site. You can also find out more on embracingdigital.com. Until next time, keep moving forward and do something wonderful.